So earlier, I was watching this program on the Discovery Channel called The Colony. If you've never seen it, it's kind of a work of post-apocalyptic fiction under the guise of a reality show, under the guise of a sociological experiment. It is a little cheesy and melodramatic and kind of staged, but it's also pretty interesting. Um, I've always enjoyed post-apocalyptic fiction, even when I was a Jehovah's Witness kid, which kind of vexed my family a little bit because, I was interested in movies and stories of people living after, what they're presenting as Armageddon, and these people aren't a bunch of Jehovah's Witnesses living in a paradise. So, my family would say, like, oh, we know that's not how it's going to be after Armageddon, and that sort of thing. But anyway, I was still interested in it. And I think the thing that may have started me being interested in it is just the thought, well, if there was massive destruction on the scale that Jehovah's Witnesses expected in Armageddon, but it didn't turn out the way witnesses were expecting, what would things be like? And I think everybody, even those who aren't raised Jehovah's Witnesses, recognize the possibility, the reality, in fact, that nothing is permanent. Even societies, even modern society, everything comes to an end. And, as strong as Western society still seems to be, even in the midst of a serious depression, we know eventually, one day, it will, almost certainly cease to exist. It will collapse sooner or later. Some people take that more seriously than other people do. And they feel the need to prepare for it, even to devote their lives to preparing for it. And I wonder, whenever I'm thinking along this line, at what point does preparing for something as certain yet unlikely to happen at a given time as a complete societal collapse is, at what point does preparation for that stop being kooky and start becoming reasonable? It reminds me of a movie I saw years ago. I think it's called Tremors. It's about the big worms under the earth. There is a character played by Michael Gross. His wife, I cannot remember her name. She is, if I remember correctly, she's a country music singer. Red hair. Somebody out there will probably know. Anyway, in the town, the setting of this movie, they're like the crazy gun people. They're the survivalists who fill their house or the trailer or whatever it is with all kinds of weapons and stockpile ammunition and everything. So, under normal circumstances, they would be the crazy people. Yet, as the story progresses and there are suddenly these unexpected worm monsters, the crazy people actually start to be the reasonable people. They're fortunate they were crazy enough to stockpile weapons and ammunition and stuff. And no, I'm not encouraging anyone to stockpile weapons and ammunition. But, I think about if someone is under, normal conditions in Western society, going out to be a hermit, live in the middle of nowhere, build a log cabin, dig a big hole in the ground to store treasures, fill up their cabin with weapons and ammunition, and booby trap their land, and all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, we would seriously consider that person to be a threat to themselves, a threat to society, and crazy. But if there were something like is presented in this program I was watching, a virus that killed enough of society to cause an economic and societal collapse, those people would suddenly be the reasonable people. They would still be crazy, but they would have a hand up on the rest of us who would be, completely unprepared for living through such a catastrophe. And, things like that have happened in the past. Not to Western society. Western society's only been around for a little while, as it is, technology and all that. But, in the Middle Ages, a third of the population of Europe and Asia was killed by the Black Plague. If in, the United States, Western Europe, if we had a disease that in a relatively short period of time killed 1 or 2%, of the population. That wouldn't be enough to mean there weren't enough people to do the necessary jobs to sustain society. But it would be enough to scare people into not doing those jobs, scare people into barricading themselves in their houses and avoiding contact with other people and not engaging in economic activity. So the economy collapses, society collapses, even if it was just temporary. If the disease burned itself out, eventually people would probably find their way back into cities, back into their jobs. But, for a while it could be catastrophic. And that's not the only way such a catastrophe could happen. In fact, an economic collapse can happen entirely of its own accord. If, for instance, the current economic problems we're having didn't reverse themselves sufficiently, if people just kept losing their jobs, eventually there would be too few people having jobs for the economy to support itself, and it could collapse. It may sound ridiculous to say it to some people, but it is a reality that, economies can collapse under their own weight, especially if they're not managed well. So anyway, I wonder at what point it stops being kooky and starts being reasonable to prepare for such a situation. And, I have to admit, I'm completely unprepared. If in a short period of time there were a virus or a radical change in climate, for instance, global cooling, which can happen very, very rapidly, that sent mankind into chaos, I would be unprepared to deal with that. So, for you out watching this video, how do you feel about that? Do you think it's reasonable under normal circumstances to prepare for complete catastrophic collapse of the economy and society? As you see the recession continue going, do you think it's reasonable to start now, preparing just in case it doesn't turn around? Or do you feel confident that there are still enough years left in Western society that you don't feel the need to change your way of thinking, your way of living, to prepare for it? So that's my question for anybody watching. Thanks.